Hi guys, welcome to my channel. Today we will find out if this country will become the greatest power in Africa. So it's probably also the biggest country in Africa, and I'm going to call it Eastern Africa. And it decides it wants to invade Mozambique. So that's what it does. So immediately, Eastern African troops enter into the country from the north, and they push in on all sides, and they push back Mozambique troops, and eventually they take quite a bit of the northern part, and Mozambique is forced to retreat. And after a week of fighting, the front line is now this. Mozambique gets its troops and it decides to do a counteroffensive here, and it pushes back a little bit on the East African troops, but it's not able to do much. The East African troops go here and they encircle the troops here, and they force them to surrender. And now they keep on pushing into the rest of Mozambique, and their goal is to capture the capital. They make this part of Mozambique also surrender, and after another week of fighting, the front lines look something like this. And Mozambique is now quite weak and is losing the fight. Now it's just how much time it will take to take the capital, which isn't long. The capital is taken, and Mozambique is forced to surrender. So let's look at this peace treaty. So here's the peace treaty. So Eastern Africa has annexed all of Mozambique, and now it has a much longer coastline, and it is coming even longer than Chile. So yeah, so this country, Eastern Africa, decides that it wants to, it thinks that it's powerful enough to invade the DRC. So let's see what happens. So East African troops come in from the north, and they push in obviously from the east, and they also push from the south, and they create a front line into the DRC. The DRC troops are not expecting this, and since they're not expecting this, the Eastern African troops kind of get an advantage, and that the DRC was unprepared, and they push into their country a little bit. So after a while, they take the panhandle of the DRC, well, one of them, and they push in more from the south, trying to create as much front lines as possible. And quite a bit of the DRC has been taken, but the DRC is not happy with this, obviously. So they make a counteroffensive in the north, and they push into Eastern Africa, and they just push back the troops all over the line, and they force quite a bit of Eastern African troops to also surrender, and they make a spearhead into Eastern Africa from the south, and now the front lines kind of look like this. So with a lot of their progress just reversed, Eastern Africa gets a bunch more troops, and they make sure to keep the DRC out of their country, and they do that quite successfully. And after another week of fighting, the front lines look like this again, and the Eastern Africa is able to get most of their lands that they took over from the beginning back, and now the DRC is on full-on retreat. So after a couple more weeks of fighting, the DRC decides to hold their ground again, but this is only able to slow down Eastern Africa, and they are able to even push back a little bit here, but not much overall. So now the Eastern Africa's main goal is to capture the capital, and they're getting quite close to it, and eventually they do capture it, and they force this other panhandle to surrender, and with a lot of their cities taken, the DRC decides to surrender. So let's look at this peace treaty. Here is the peace treaty. So the DRC is fully annexed, which is quite harsh, and now Eastern Africa is now even bigger and is even more buff. And a lot of countries around on the DRC's borders are starting to get worried, especially Zambia and Malawi, and they decide to kind of just ally themselves just in case if they get invaded, they will help out each other. And this is quite good, but this angers Eastern Africa, and they decide to invade. So they push in from the south of Malawi and swiftly take the capital in the middle here, and the entire country of Malawi falls within a day. So now troops enter into Zambia from the panhandle of the DRC, and they split the country into two, and they force this bit of Zambia to surrender, and the Zambians are not happy with this, obviously, and the capital was also taken, so they decide to make a counteroffensive here, and they push a little bit into Eastern Africa, a little bit to Malawi, and they take back their capital. But this does not last long, as troops from the west push in, and now it's as if Zambia had done nothing. The capital is retaken, and now Zambia is being pushed back, and it's not looking too good for them. So after a couple more days, Zambia decides to surrender. Let's look at this peace treaty. Here is the peace treaty. So Zambia and Malawi have been fully annexed, which is also quite harsh on them, as they did nothing. And now the Eastern Africa is quite powerful, and yeah, so they're probably now the greatest power in Africa. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, smash that like button, subscribe, leave a comment even, and have a good morning, afternoon, or evening. Bye!